After 25 years, the long-awaited sequel to the 90s nostalgic classic Space Jam has finally arrived on the big screen and at home on HBO Max, so all of us geeks can just chill on the couch, take out the remote, and pause it anytime we see a favorite cameo from a Warner Brothers film. So I was a bit iffy on the original Space Jam, but I appreciate it as a time capsule of the 90s. But in order to replace Jordan, who wouldn't return for a sequel, they needed to find some kind of athlete or superstar who was just as big as him, and they went through quite a few people in that 25 years. They tried to get Tony Hawk to do it, they tried to get Tiger Woods to do it, Jackie Chan, Jeff Gordon, and after so many times where it fell apart, LeBron James finally said yes, finally worked out, and honestly, I kinda had the hope that this could possibly be better than the original, just because this kind of movie has proven successful in the past, even from Warner Brothers, and I think you could make it work. Now, do they make it work? Space Jam: A New Legacy. They titled it A New Legacy because I guess it was trying to crush the original film's perceived legacy. It opens a lot like the original. LeBron James is just a kid in 1998 playing basketball for a local team, but gets distracted by a Game Boy. And he happens to be playing a Looney Tunes video game, while his Looney Tunes backpack sits beside him. I would argue that Looney Tunes were not popular enough with kids in 1998 to be featured in merchandise, but literally because of Space Jam being released and other factors, Looney Tunes had a renaissance in the 90s, so it kind of makes sense. The game he's playing happens to be Crazy Castle. It's great they referenced a real video game rather than making a fake one, and this is probably the most exposure this game has gotten since the Angry Video Game Nerd. Anyways, I'm thinking way too hard about this. In Space Jam 2, Electoon Boogaloon, LeBron James, growing up with basketball, becomes one of the most prolific stars in the NBA, with the notion that he may be the greatest of all time, neck and neck with Michael Jordan. Of course, if you compare this opening credits to the perfection of the original Space Jam, then there's no question about it. Jordan's number one all day. Unfortunately, the NBA doesn't take movie intros as a measurable stat. So as his family lives in this giant mansion, which makes more sense monetarily when compared to Jordan's fake-ass suburban home in the 96 Space Jam, one of his sons is quite good at basketball, while his other son is more into video games. And because LeBron needs to be a typical doofus father, he doesn't understand why his son cares more for games than the game of basketball. And in typical Hollywood fashion, LeBron, who plays himself, is accompanied by a family of actors, not his real family, and has zero interactions with his youngest daughter, who's an actress, but still, doesn't talk to her once. Just an everyday family guy. Anyways, LeBron decides to reconnect with his video game loving son, and they take a visit to Warner Brothers because LeBron was invited to check out their CGI software that can recreate humans in digital form and have them perform in movies without having to be filmed. Yeah, they could just do a digital scan of LeBron and he can star in any movie in existence. I feel like this was the original pitch that they gave to LeBron. It's basically artificial filmmaking, which LeBron lambasts them about, and I can't help but feel that Warner Brothers is just testing the audience to see if we like this idea or not. Look, Hollywood is getting way too comfortable recreating actors digitally. Even James Dean is still getting cast in things. The artificial intelligence named Al G, get it? Played by Don Cheadle, is furious that LeBron doesn't take the bait, so he takes both him and his son into the Warner Brothers serververse, which is so similar to Snyderverse, it's actually starting to annoy me, and through a contrived set of circumstances, sets up a basketball game between them both. If LeBron wins, everybody goes free, but if he loses, he'll be trapped along with a huge portion of the world population in the serververse where LG was trying to create this artificial filmmaking software based on the algorithm. Plus, the Looney Tunes will be deleted for no apparent reason. So essentially, LG is just Skynet, with a side of stupid-ass Batman villain rules. So, with the help of Bugs Bunny, LeBron assembles an elite squad of Warner Brothers characters, who all happen to be Looney Tunes. And yes, while I wanted to see the Looney Tunes again, a team with Superman, King Kong, and others would have been much more interesting. It's pretty much a retread of the 96 original, but with advances in computer technology for effects that look way better, and a little too much negative influence from Ready Player One, Ralph Breaks the Internet, and the Lego Movie. The franchise mashup has become a common trope in cinema lately, but those 3 previous movies I mentioned all had positives that didn't make the references seem forced or promotional. They filled the world, but had compelling stories and action that made for a good standalone movie. Nevertheless, this is a sequel to Space Jam. They're taking the worst ideas from all these productions and putting it into one kind of messy film. Space Jam: A New Legacy feels like a missed opportunity. I'm sure many didn't expect much coming into it, but as I said, this concept, in a goofy sense, could be pulled off. But it almost takes itself too seriously. Like, Space Jam on paper sounds like a silly executive project, but watching it, it at least knows it's a dumb movie, whereas the sequel has this belief that the original Space Jam is the gospel of film, and the sequel must be bolder, bigger, and filled with more references, because that must be what the people want. Wasn't the original a big hit because of Jordan himself? At the time, I'd at least give credit that there hadn't been too many live-action animation hybrids, so it was still a unique novelty, and that the Looney Tunes were recognizable because of the television reruns. But overall, Michael Jordan, in 1996, returning to the NBA was one of the biggest things to happen ever. No matter what your thoughts are on LeBron versus Jordan, I think Michael was the more popular player because at the time, he was the first of his kind, and the only of his kind. A once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon. That's why Space Jam was a hit at the time, and years later, it's retained its popularity amongst 90s kids because it's a time capsule, not because the story is appreciated or the characters are adored. Any Looney Tunes fan will tell you that Space Jam isn't the best representation of the cartoons, and the plot was stupid but easy to follow, whereas A New Legacy almost makes it too contrived. In a sense, I guess the sequel is a future time capsule with its numerous current pop culture references, but they put so much in here, it kind of gets lost in the madness, and we don't have time to admire anything. It doesn't work because as much as LeBron can fly by Harry Potter World and see tons of movie characters in the audience at the basketball game, it always trails off to focus on the dumb story that no one cares about. The original movie at least had some focus on the cameos it was showing off. It had a substantial amount of Bill Murray and the Looney Tunes and the other NBA stars of the era. But here, they run around so much, I can't even take a moment to relax with the fan service. I got really amped when I saw Mama Fratelli in the background, or The Mask, or the Clockwork Orange Droogs, which is an admittedly odd inclusion, but you only get a few seconds with them, and it's tough to even notice who they are. It also doesn't help that the references can get lazy. Like, if you're going to essentially make HBO Max the movie and have Voldemort in the background, at least take the time to digitally remove his nose. Are these the Warner Brothers characters or the Times Square versions of the characters? The fan service doesn't deliver, but at least Warner Animation Group is involved, so maybe we'll get some great animated moments. And you know what? You do! It's neat to see the Looney Tunes world that looks and feels like the classic shorts. They even take the time to fully animate LeBron. Even if there's an excessive Nike promotion, I really think this is a better tribute to the cartoons than the 96 film. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't last too long. Honestly, I think it's cool when they used Mad Max Fury Road, Austin Powers, and The Matrix footage to digitally add the Looney Tunes. It was an enjoyable gimmick, and we get some fully animated sequences containing all the Chuck Jones goofiness, even if it's a bit soft. There's an extended bit where they visit the animated DC universe, and it's a lot of fun. One of the highlights of A New Legacy. Even Big Chungus makes an appearance. I know, according to Twitter, I have to be cynical about this, but the Big Chungus meme was a guilty pleasure of mine. Plus, it's actually from the original cartoon, so it's more a reference to that than to the meme, I guess, so just shut up. They do eventually become computer-animated hybrids, but it's only for the basketball scene, and truthfully, I think the animators did a great job. It looks fantastic, even if it's breaking away from the traditional hand-drawn style. Regardless, the animation was top-notch. Now, give the animators the credit they deserve, WB. However, it's still a missed opportunity in many departments. The story is bland while also being randomly contrived. I don't understand why LeBron has to play his son in a game of basketball. It makes sense that the villain would be this bombastic, and Don Cheadle is clearly having fun as the only famous actor not playing himself. Except for Sarah Silverman, who up until now I completely forgot was in this movie. The plot is still too pointless and lacks any emotion. Granted, the first Space Jam was the same way, but there's something more enjoyably dumb about random aliens playing the basketball game against the Looney Tunes. It sounds like something they would do in one of the short films, even if it doesn't play out like a classic Looney Tunes short film. Here, the Looney Tunes, who barely make any reference to the '96 Space Jam, don't have any stake in playing with LeBron. Al G threatens to destroy them if they lose, but why? I thought this would be some kind of heartfelt story about the culture forgetting about the Looney Tunes, which led to them breaking up, and they'd get back together in the same vein as something like the 2011 Muppet movie. In fact, it starts to play out that way, but the writing eventually drifts off. There's hardly any practice for the game itself, so it's not about teamwork or an underdog story, and there's a fight between LeBron and Bugs Bunny, which you'd think would turn into that cliched plotline where two characters have a misunderstanding and break up before the third act, but even that is quickly forgotten. They can't even rely on the easy cliches. So with no semblance of emotion, and to instead have muddled focus on the references and limited jokes, I have no clue why they need to end things with Bugs Bunny sacrificing his life. Am I supposed to be all choked up when Bugs Bunny does this? LeBron's reasoning to make the move himself made a lot of sense, and I wanted to see it play out. Instead, Bugs Bunny steps up, which is kind of out of character for him. Don't worry though, he's alive at the end, with hardly any explanation. See, all the audience members out there who could care less? Warner Brothers fooled ya! It's also too bad that LeBron James, who was actually quite good as a side character in Trainwreck, just doesn't have the acting ability to take on the lead role. He's way better at line delivery than Jordan ever was, but just barely. I thought he'd make for an entertaining performance, and I thought he would have some good acting chops. But King James can't save this material. Everything was a disappointment, but I think I probably expected something different than other viewers. But have the nostalgic fans been happy with the sequel? There's a few things that amused me, and it's not a comprehensively awful time, but it still reeks of a Warner Brothers executive pushing for a Space Jam sequel for years, and finally getting it via a diet version of Ready Player One. I even theorized how they could have Michael Jordan appear as a de-aged version of his 1996 self, and have him play along with LeBron, not to settle the who's better debate, but just to see the two NBA greats play side by side. It was never going to happen, but I think that would have been a much more interesting plot twist than Bugs Bunny sacrificing himself. The funniest joke in the movie at least references Michael Jordan. Any other joke I laughed at always involved the Looney Tunes being their true selves. Space Jam: A New Legacy is worthy of pausing and getting screen grabs of your favorite Warner Brothers franchises, but otherwise, it's a sequel that's 20 years too late. I don't even think a sequel to Space Jam was necessary. I don't really know how you were gonna top that. Now, let me explain what I mean. I don't think there was a way to top the idea of Space Jam because it felt like a once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon. The fact that that movie, that plot, somehow survived so many levels of production, and the fact that it was kind of hailed as this strange cult classic time capsule of the 90s, I don't think it needed to be replicated. But if you were going to try it again, I honestly had some hope because, like I said, there were other movies that you could play off of that have kind of made this concept work, especially if you wanted to incorporate Warner Brothers characters. In the end, it just feels like a cash grab that's banking on LeBron's name and on other Warner Brothers properties. Well, let's look forward to another 20 years when I'm sure they'll do another Space Jam Evolution. Special thanks to Ryan for this Patreon request. Thanks for watching the video, and special shout out to Lauren, Anthony, Anna, Kirsten, Spencer, Lucas, Ryan, and Robert for supporting me on Patreon. By joining my Patreon, you can get exclusive blogs and videos, and for just $7, you can get your own monthly movie review. I hope you stick around, cinephile, and have a happy, productive day.